Hey everyone, welcome back today to Berlin Noir, and today we are on episode 20, and yeah, it's pretty crazy to think that we are already on episode 20. This series has been going for over 6 months actually, and which, I mean, really isn't that long, considering, other YouTubers, City Skylines series can go for, years, 2 years or so, and it's 6 months is relative to that not too long, but still a lot of time. 20 episodes is not a small chunk, and there's still nonetheless a lot of the city that is still left to be built. But anyways, let's get into today's build. So for today, we are going to be finishing up this little ship canal area. I started this briefly off camera, actually, in the previous episode when we built the Leiter Bahnhof. And I considered for today to, finish the train yard that connects to that station, as well as build the pretty small Hamburg station, the Hamburg Bahnhof, which is right next to this area as well. That'll probably be in the next episode, so if you're into trains, you're into rail yards, and you like train stations or whatever, look forward to possibly the next episode. I assume it'll be the next episode, but we shall see. But anyways, yeah, so I start off with just working on this little entrance, or I guess exit, depending on which way the ships are going, to this little canal. I did add, you might have briefly saw there, but that little dock hanging off, that's actually for ferries, but I found the only small profile, like at least something that isn't modern, the only small ferry that would actually fit in this city, and it was just more or less a tiny little boat. So you might see that shooting around occasionally, but I just wanted some traffic in the water to add some realism, because the water looked pretty bland, not much going on, just no ships, no barges, no nothing. So at least we now have something. But this little area here, this is, I'm basing this off of the aerial view that I have of the city back then, which reminds me, I linked the link to the Tagesspiegel website for the aerial view, which I've been using for most of the series, pretty much, since like the first or second episode. So, I mention it in a decent amount of episodes, but I'm sure a number of you aren't really sure exactly what I'm referencing. And more importantly, now you can actually, click on the link and look at the area yourself. So when I talk about what I'm looking at, now you can also, see for yourself in detail on your phone or on the computer, and you can zoom in and, not just a quick little screen that passes by on the video. But so yeah, that is in the link to the description. But so yeah, for this little area here, this is just tiny little, it's like one of the areas in a city where you just kind of think like, what on earth were the developers thinking? And it's not that bad. What I built definitely looks weird. To be honest, like I was building thinking like, this is just, I don't know, I don't really like this, but I don't know, it turns out it's not exactly what I was picturing. And there's a ton of these little small bushes and trees which are really lined up on each other, which is accurate if you look at the aerial view. It was like that same area where the trees are. I placed them in the game here. And yeah, I don't know, it's unusual, but it's a very small part, so I'm leaving it. And what I like this little technique here. There's this, I think it's the stain. I forget if it's one of the stain or the wear decals, but they're basically dried out, either whether it would be water or some other sort of liquid that evaporates off of the cement or pavement, and get a look like that. So this area is slightly down in elevation by the canal, so you figure certain areas there would be runoff from the streets from rain and whatnot. So I like doing that because it looks like, that's where water would run off the streets down to the canal. But yeah, so I like doing that. I do that a lot in, my other, when I would build, not in a European city, but my previous series in Las Colinas, and just when I was playing the game by myself, I always like to do that. But this thing here is supposed to be like a little, not really a ramp, but kind of like an entrance from the start of the bridge to the slightly down in elevation close to the canal. So I mean, I just put trees on this, which is how it looks, in the pictures I saw in the aerial view. So I mean, yeah, I don't know. That's supposed to be what that is. Just the cars would drive down through there and get access to the the waterfront for shipments from the bridge or ships, whatever it may be. But I put these are actually garbage props, but it could also just be gravel, or really, that's more or less what I was thinking. And just placing some trucks as well as some boxed up crates, shipments from the ships and the boats that come through here. But I also, I believe in a second, I make the, right here, or did I actually believe I accidentally cut that out? Okay. But I pushed back the rear side of the canal entrance here, so there's a little less space, so there's not just so much open, just gray stone pavement, since there was nothing there in real life. I wasn't going to put anything, so I made that a little smaller and made the canal area a tad bit bigger. But anyways, so we're moving on from that to really what is the main part of today's build, which is going to be in a tad bit, because I do these small little residential blocks here. But the main part of today's build is the Charité medical hospital / school. It's kind of functions as both, which it's in English just means charity. It was built actually in response to one of the later events of the bubonic plague. And even though Berlin itself was spared, they still built the small hospital outside of the city walls. And that was in 1710. And then about 17 years later or so, Frederick William I of Prussia named the hospital after the French name French word for charity. So what it became was really what it was named for, which was a charity hospital for the poor and outside of the city center. But it also functioned and still does as a medical school for doctors and nurses and such. So the assets I end up using are actually, one of them in particular is based on a university building in Tennessee, believe it or not. But honestly, of all the things I saw in the workshop, that building, which you'll see in a tad, matched the real life buildings in this location surprisingly, well. Which, I mean, again, we'll get there in a sec, but for now I'm just doing these tiny little residential blocks. I laid out a ton of the road networks on this side of the Spree River, since pretty much all the episodes up until fairly recently have been only on the one side of the Spree River that runs through the city. But with Alexanderplatz and now the train station here, as well as this episode, we're finally getting onto the other side, which I've been wanting to do because it definitely allows, especially for like screenshots and just, cinematic shots and videos as well. Once you have both sides of a river completed, it just opens up so many possibilities for awesome shots, and I'm looking forward to that. And we're getting close to being able to do that. But, yeah, I do definitely want to work on a few more episodes on this side. And I also have not really any plans, very soon, but I'm in the very beginning of working on, subscribing to assets and maps and just figuring out what I want to do for a new mini-series. So I'm not going to tell anyone what it is. It's I will say it's in the 80s. That's the one and only hint. Make of that what you will. It's going to be in the 1980s. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I don't think that's going to come anytime soon because, like I said, I'm in the early stages and I'm still enjoying, have plenty of motivation building in Berlin Noir. So really, once I run out of motivation or ideas, that's when I'll switch over to the miniseries. But enough on that. Here is finally, we are beginning work on the hospital. And so this building here is by Titan, I believe, and it's the City Palace, which is actually a real building, real palace located in Eisenach, Germany. And yeah, so when I was looking through the Steam Workshop, I found this modular set here, as well as what I mentioned earlier, the university buildings from a university in Tennessee. But for the main part of the hospital, I liked this because it was modular, and it's, I wanted the wings that spread out from the, central part of the building. And that, was what I got from this particular asset here. And it's not super recognizable, at least I imagine. I mean, I'm sure a couple of you who are, live in Germany probably recognize this or might have seen it before. But I mean, Eisenach is a pretty small city. So it's, I never heard of it before today. But yeah, it's nice for, like I said, the main building, and using PO here just to make the roof connections smooth and look nice. I really need to do that more, and I've actually have been doing that more off camera. I've been fixing a couple locations where, like, it's not a 90-degree corner, or it's not is it 135 degrees where they make buildings like that? I forget the exact angle, but it's the awkward angles, which, realistically, most city corners in, European city are not going to be 90 degrees. So, realistically, I want to try and make some more city corners or intersections where they're awkward angles, 80 degrees, 120, everything in between. So, I have to use two buildings in order to do that. But when roofs just, look ugly because they cross over each other and it doesn't look right. So I'm going to do that off camera, probably find a couple that look really bad and try and fix that with PO. But anyways, here is the building that I mentioned earlier. At least one of them. It's actually a two-pack. There's a corner building, which is not symmetrical, because that's actually the building I kind of wanted to use mostly, since I said it most, looks most similar to the real life buildings here. But yeah, this one right here, I thought it was symmetrical looking at the workshop on the asset, but as you can see, one wing of the building is a little bit larger than the other, and there's only one entrance on one side, so I kind of wasn't going to be able to make that my main building where I place the modular palace. But yeah, I haven't really gotten any good shots of the Tennessee University building, but yeah, there we go, right there. So with the bluish roofs and the kind of red brick walls, and honestly, the style looks fairly close to, some city buildings in Germany. So that's why I went with that particular asset, or the two assets. So I think it actually looks really good in this situation. But yeah, like I said, unfortunately, it just didn't look right when I tried to make the entirety of the hospital based on that building. So that's why I went with the modular palace there. But anyway, so in using both of these buildings, it kind of looks like, maybe these new, these university buildings from Tennessee are maybe perhaps part of the, the school and university part of the Charity Hospital, which would have was built, after the original buildings were built, which were just for the hospital part. But so yeah, it kind of looks partly like a university, partly like a hospital, I guess. So I mean that, and yeah, considering this actually functions as both, that's all right. I didn't want it looking too much like a university, which there are, once you'll see in the cinematics and maybe a little bit at the end of the video, but there are quite a lot of people walking around, since these are actually university buildings, that's their function in game. So, I mean, you can see a decent amount of cars already, and I've just placed those buildings. So, yeah, there's going to be a ton of people walking around, which, again, kind of makes it look more like a university than a hospital. But I still think it looks cool. The location looks pretty decent. But anyways, I do end up later placing a lot of trees, which is, I mean, based on the aerial view of this area, there are a ton of trees, which is a pretty common theme, honestly, in, a lot of these locations that I'm building, especially universities, hospitals. When I built the technical university, there was a ton of trees. And likewise, in this location, there appears to be a ton of trees, especially if you compare it to modern day. Modern day, you can easily see the buildings, and of course, it's also a satellite picture with color, so it's much easier to distinguish what's building, what's grass, what's trees, versus, an aerial view taken from a old camera from a, observation balloon or something. But, looking at the aerial view from back then, it's hard to make out exactly where the buildings go, where the paths go. So I honestly looked a lot at modern day, since a decent amount of the buildings that exist today also existed back then. At least of the main part of the hospital and university. Obviously, there's the very large main part of the hospital, the main part of the charity hospital that has a very large sign that says Charité. But, obviously that certainly did not exist back then. And where it exists now was just actually what appears to be just an average residential block. So, after World War II and after, the reunification of Germany, then that hospital popped up. But, so anyways, as I was building this, I wanted to get the general layout first. So it looks, as you can see, very just plain, not a lot of stuff going on. Then I, laid the buildings after the roads, and now I'm doing these dark stone pathways, which I've been using quite a lot because, I haven't really been able to find a lot of nice paths on the workshop. Like, there's a couple, like I'm subscribed to 3 path networks that, that look pretty decently. This one here that I'm using, I'm also subscribed to I think it's called like pedestrian sidewalk or something like that. But the thing with that is the connections have to be spaced out at least like enough so they don't, like, it just glitches out. And then also if the terrain's uneven, it also glitches out. So that kind of, for the most part, Berlin is pretty flat, so I've been able to use that, but it still is a little limiting. And then I'm subscribed to another, I don't know what it's called, but another path set, which is stone. It looks kind of modern, like if you actually look at it up close, but from a distance it just looks like a, gray stone path. But that one, when you connect it to another path, regardless of what angle it is at, it leaves a hole in the connection. So there's just dirt there, and it looks terrible. So it's like you have to draw paths over each other. You can't connect them, which is just not as easy as simply what I did here and just, connecting paths to one another and, doing something like that. Where I just did there would be a giant dirt patch at the foot of the stairs, just for whatever reason. I don't know why it's like that. So that leaves me really, when it comes to decent looking paths, to hardly anything, which is why I have been using the path that I use in this episode as well as several others so often. But so I'm detailing this little center roundabout type thing, just placing some flowers, bushes, and a nice little fountain in the middle. I really love this fountain asset. I use it quite a lot in the city in nice areas, of course. Not too much, but it is a very nice asset because it's actually, you can actually see the water going on it. But and then on the rear side of the main hospital part, I built this little plaza, I guess. I don't know. This isn't really based off of anything that I saw on the map. It's just kind of how the roads came together here. It made this little triangular area. So I figured, hey, what the heck? Might as well make a little plaza area. Converted those cobblestone decals to procedural objects, so I can just easily, make the border between the gray stone and the cobblestone there. Don't have to worry about, the decals going over or anything. But and then I just had that little statue in the center, some dude on a horse, which is pretty much all the statues that I'm subscribed to in the workshop are like that, or at least half of them. Plus the vanilla statue, which is pretty decent. It's been around since day one of the game. It's, some dude on a horse as well. But I don't know who this is, but or who the statue is after. I don't remember. Not that it really matters either. I mean, you're not going to be up close enough to recognize it anyways. But just placing some benches, which are actually parks, so people should come and sit on it. And then from what I just built to this, I placed a ton of trees, which I actually cut out of the footage because, placing trees isn't that exciting, and you have all seen me do it plenty of times before, so I just simply cut that out. But anyways, we are close to the end of the episode, and I do want to say I have started my Patreon account, and those of you that have expressed interest in joining it for access to the save game is on the Patreon account. So if you've made it this far in the video and you're interested in that, consider checking that out in the link below and see how we built the city so far. So I hope you all enjoy, and I will see you all next time.